Hello, everybody, and welcome to Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. My guest today is David A. Johnston of Morpheus, a decentralized AI effort. Now, ChatGPT is clearly the next very big thing to emerge in computing since Bitcoin and Ethereum. It gained 100 million users in just 2.5 months, which I think is the fastest adoption rate for anything ever. And yet, over the last few weeks, we saw this governance chaos erupt at OpenAI as the board fired and then unfired CEO and founder Sam Altman. Also, in general, we've seen this wrestling for control over an AI's point of view. Does it give woke or conservative answers? Does it paper over vaccine controversies? Effectively, does it lie to benefit one political view over another? So how do we ensure AI truth and keep it propaganda free? Now, centralized actors, because of this, centralized actors can clearly wield a lot of AI propaganda power. And while crypto favors the edges, AI seems to favor the very large and very centralized. So they would seem to be opposites. Yet today we're here to talk with David about a vision which fuses the best of both of these models. So hello, David, and welcome to Hashrate.
Glad to be here, Mark. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so tell me about Morpheus, because I heard about this. Sort of the genesis of this for me was, I knew about render, which, so it was the idea of decentralized GPU was sort of floating around in my brain. And then I saw TAO, which is the Bittensor coin, pump out of nowhere up to number 37 at like $1.8 billion valuation on only $8 million worth of volume, mind you. So kind of bullshit, right? But whatever. It definitely popped up a little bit on my radar. So I started thinking about this a little bit more, and I tweeted about it. And Eric Voorhees sort of pointed at you and at Morpheus, and sort of like the ghost of Christmas, future, right? He didn't really say much. He just sort of pointed. So I went and looked, and I came across your Twitter feed. So let me turn it over to you for a little bit. Talk to me about what is Morpheus and what are you hoping to accomplish?
So it's been an interesting project. It was proposed a few months back in September by a group of anonymous developers calling themselves Morpheus, Trinity, and Neo. And they sent the community a white paper on September 2nd, which I only realized later is Keanu Reeves' birthday. And so I was like, nice Easter egg. And Eric was like, I wonder how long they waited to send that paper before just to get that Easter egg in there. But I had been writing about this idea of smart agents and combining AI agents and smart contracts, right? Enabling them with a user's wallet, letting a user express control over an AI with their data. And so, not surprisingly, people had kind of heard about that concept. And so Morpheus was proposed as a network for powering smart agents, right? And it's some of the topics you already covered, like, okay, well, you need decentralized compute, right? Bittensor, Render, there are other good networks doing that. But you also need front ends that integrate with wallets. You need to incentivize people to build these open source agents. And so this idea was kind of floating out there. And then really what sparked it off was that executive order that came out at the end of October. Lit a fire under
executive order.
Oh yeah, I don't know if you've read the thing. It's 100 pages long.
Yeah, but I've read the whole thing. But yeah, I've read the summaries.
Yeah, the DLTR, the TLTR is one. They're going to do KYC on compute and data going forward, so that no foreign people can use AI training in the U.S. For compute. They're putting a cap on permissionless models. I kid you not, at 10 billion parameters, which is 20 gigs. My laptop has more space than you'll be allowed to use a permissionless model for.
Right. So just so everyone understands what you're talking about here, they're basically capping the intelligence of the AI by capping its compute power, right? And they're capping it extremely, extremely low, right?
Yes.
So it's like a Neanderthal AI, right? So
now, I mean, this is just like absurd, right? The number they picked for the cap on compute is what Bitcoin does in 3 minutes. Just to give you a sense of how much, compute, us, lowly people are allowed to access. Only so much math for the average man apparently is is to be allowed. The really crazy one is in 235 days, the Commerce Department will determine whether open source AI constitutes dual use munitions, meaning it will be illegal to release open source AI in the US and disclose it to a foreign person. I mean, this is like 1991 crypto wars all over
about
again.
This. Yeah. I was going to just bring that up. Yeah, back when encryption itself was declared a munition. And and so thankfully we won that battle and we got strong citizen cryptography, but it looked for a while like we might not. Like it was very much the same vibe as there is surrounding AI right now.
Right. Well, and the funny thing is, do you remember who proposed the bill to ban encryption on emails in 1991? It was Joe Biden. I kid you not. Like here we are 32 years later and he's trying to ban math again. But famously, that's what inspired Phil Zimmerman to release PGP. Right? That's how we got PGP is he rushed and open sourced that, famously printed it in books, printed it on t-shirts, walked across the border at one point, got arrested for wearing a t-shirt. For some reason, the courts were unwilling to ban books and t-shirts. And so he eventually won that court case on First Amendment grounds, which is great. So I think, we're kind of reliving that all over again.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So let me steer back to like what the Morpheus project is. So, so is it like basically you have this AI that's fully open source and fully decentralized and distributed, right? So the GPU for this to construct this AI and do the training and answer the questions, it's effectively like miners in the Bitcoin network, right? Where you're sort of creating this peer-to-peer mesh network of GPU for the AI, and the AI manages itself. It pays for its own storage on Filecoin, based on what I read. I think I got that right. And it's hungry for money to pay for stuff, and it's hungry for GPU to process stuff. So as you contribute these things to the independent AI, which is sort of a DAO AI, you can get rewarded in its coin. Is that basically correct?
So most of that is correct, though. Really, in the Morpheus context, it puts the human more at the center. So this isn't an autonomous AI. The network is not running an AI. You have an AI connected to your wallet, connected to your data, running on your computer. Nobody else can control it. Only you can authorize transactions. Only you can tell it what to do, right?
Okay.
And so the network effects come in for the compute, right? But not in the ownership. So I think there's this illusion going around that we're going to get group alignment of an AI. That is impossible. That is not happening, right? What we're going to get is individual alignment with an AI. I want to express my preferences freely. I want the AI to understand those preferences and take an action on my behalf if I authorize it with my private key. I think that's the right approach. And that's why I really liked the Morpheus paper. It's like, this is the way to do it, not, running off in some direction without, guidance or us imbuing will. I want the individual to be at the center of this.
Okay, so it's not a mesh network of computers creating a massive AI. It's not Neuromancer or Wintermute, right? Which is sort of where I thought you guys were going, right? Where it was an independent, decentralized P2P, GPU AI. So it's not that. It's a network of individual AIs on home computers, and you run your own AI. Now, how is my home computer AI powerful enough to compete with ChatGPT or something that has just voracious amounts of GPU and processing power and giant amounts of training data?
Right. So, the key to Morpheus is it's really individualized, right? It's an individual with their own wallet, with their own data, and you're controlling your individual AI, right? You're expressing intent. Hey, here's what I want to accomplish. I want to send some Bitcoin to Bob. Okay, is this the Bob you want to send it to? Is this the amount? Push this button on your MetaMask wallet, right? And so I think that's the key, is having individual AI, right? Having a personal AI that's tuned to your personal data. It's totally open source, controlled by you, and there's no intermediary or custodian in between you and your information.
Yeah, so the AI is running locally on my machine. So you're not building
Yeah.
Wintermute or Neuromancer. It's not
Right.
that, right? So it's not a peer-to-peer network mesh. It's creating this hyper intelligence that's got its own wallets and doing whatever it wants. Yeah,
Right.
instead, it's on my machine at home, and perhaps on my machine at home, it has access to wallets that I have given it, my own wallets that I've given it access to. Then it acts as a voice command AI or a command, an AI user interface to my wallet. So I
Yeah.
say, I want to get some dollars of mine sent from here to here, and it'll just do it. And I don't have to mess around with
Exactly.
Ethereum or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Cool.
no, I think that's the key, right? So I ended up writing this algorithm earlier this year called SmartRank, right?
Yep.
And this is what got reflected in their paper was this idea of ranking all the smart contracts based by the number of transactions that have been done with them, right? Which is a very hard to fake metric, right? That there's only a few stable coins that have hundreds of millions of uses, right, and transactions. And so creating a graph, an organic representation of the market, is a good way to teach the AI and say, okay, here is the real true ranks for what to recommend when somebody says they want to make a payment, they want to go stake their ETH. It's recommending Lido, which just has $16 billion in ETH staked and not some random token, a guy on YouTube recommended and got picked up by the algorithm, right? We want to imbue this type of wisdom. And so that smart rank, in technical terms, it's called an embedding, right? It's some extra data that you're handing to the generalized model to say, hey, when somebody asks about Web3, when they say something like Bitcoin or Ethereum, here's something you can use to recommend the best course of action, right? And that's what I would draw the distinction here is the proprietary closed source projects can give you an informational AI, right? It can tell you something. It can give you some piece of information, but it can't take actions for you. And it was really compelling about Morpheus is, okay, here's an action-based AI. And so I've got the private key and I can authorize that transaction and I can send that payment because it's my personal AI, right? This gets back to all the regulations around if you're a third-party custodian or if it's just a user using their own funds, their own AI, their own data, they have a lot more freedom to really take action.
Right. And so, let's talk about that. So if it's on my home computer, ChatGPT is incredibly powerful because it has an insane amount of GPU and a very, very, very large amount of data that it has consumed for its training data. Whereas I would imagine like whatever I'm running on my home computer is quite a bit smaller, both in terms of its processing power and the training data that's behind it. How is why isn't that going to be really crappy compared to ChatGPT or Bard or something like that?
That's a great question. The open source models, that might have been true 6 or 12 months ago, but the open source models have really quickly caught up. So some of them are within like 95% of like a ChatGPT 4
Really?
as far as performance.
Something I can run on my home computer is 95% of ChatGPT.
Right.
How is that possible?
Because you're not doing the training of the model locally, right? It was the folks at Meta that released Llama 2, right? It was the folks at the university that released Falcon. There's a big company in France called Mistral that just released a great model. They spent the $100 million training the model, open sourced it, and now you get that $100 million model in 14 gigs. It just sits in your memory. It really doesn't use any compute at all. It's really a database that's predicting statistically what's the next word, right? What's the next language token, right, that comes after this question, right? That's what it's doing. So once you've trained the model, you kind of did the hard work. And now, because it's open source, people are building what is called fine tunings. And this is like, oh, I want to teach it about code. I want to teach it about math. I want it to give really great answers. And they're adding subject matter expertise to these general models. That's basically what I did with SmartRank, right? Was you think of it as a fine tuning that you can add to a large language model that then teaches it about smart contracts, teaches about Bitcoin, it teaches about transactions and all of this, right? And gives it that subject matter expertise.
Got it. So you've basically created like a DeFi AI.
Yeah.
Right? That's like your friend that's a DeFi expert, basically.
Yep.
And can actually do stuff for you because it actually, it's got, if you give it permission, it's got access to your wallets. And so you don't even have to know how to run MetaMask. You have to think about gas. You just tell the AI what you want it to do, and off it goes, and it'll get money for you, send it here, stake it in, stake your ETH for you. Like, I don't know, I've heard about this ETH staking. How much can I get? Ask it questions like, how much percent APY can I get? And it'll come back and be like, well, it's roughly this. And you're like, okay, do it. And it'll do it in the most reputable, Lido probably, the most reputable Ethereum staking offering that's out there based on the popularity of it, based on the transaction volume. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And you think about it, there's no company on earth, not even Google or Microsoft, that are as big as the open source community, because the open source community is everyone, right? Any interested person that wants to contribute can add to the data, they can add to the compute, and that's kind of why Linux eventually won on servers. Like 95% of all servers are Linux, because who wants to pay a license fee to Microsoft every time you spin up a new instance? Like, as a developer, that doesn't make any sense, right? That's what we got with phones, right? 80% of them are using Android. Why are they using Android? Because it was a Unix, Linux-based operating system, and thus you didn't have to pay a license fee. So, tell me, the 1.4 billion people in India, are they going to pay $20 a month to Microsoft? Probably not. They're probably going to opt for the free, open source, product that is really almost exactly equivalent. My expectation is by next quarter, the AI models will have surpassed the proprietary models, and they're not going to look back, right? Wow. Once it gets to that point, that's like the tipping point, and people just run off. There'll still be open AI. If you're an enterprise, you'll probably use it. If you're a wealthy individual and you have some use case for it, great. But I think most people just build on the open source.
So given this executive order from Biden, is it going to make running your own personal open source AI at home, sort of at the level of intelligence that Morpheus has right now? Would that become illegal?
No, the executive order has really targeted companies that are doing the training and using the compute, and they haven't really talked anything about end users. So it's sort of like saying, regardless of the rules about how the government feels about Bitcoin data centers, right? People can still use Bitcoin by just having a private public key pair, meaning a wallet, right? And so self-custodied wallets are great. And if you think about the history of Bitcoin, most of the Bitcoin mining was done overseas, right? It didn't come to Texas and the US largely until recently. And AI is going to be the exact same. Whatever jurisdictions decide to be friendliest, guess what? That's where most of the training is going to happen. I mean, it's already in the last week, England has said the UK will not regulate foundational models, right? And that was a big thing for them to come out and say that after the executive order. But what they're trying to do is attract the top AI companies to London and get them out of San Francisco, right? So it's a competitive marketplace for jurisdictions. People are going to go wherever they're treated best, right? To quote the nomad capitalist, that's how it works, right?
So, what is there a crypto coin component to Morpheus? So, in other words, do I earn coins in any way, or is it completely? Is it just like an AI that helps you as your DeFi expert, or is there another, there's another crypto-like component to it at all?
So the cool thing about Morpheus is it's agnostic. You can use it for Web3 with the smart rank information, but you could just use it as a ChatGPT replacement. Right. There are multimodal models that are coming out now, which are pretty good. You'll be able to create images and so on and so forth. And you can run all of that locally. You don't need a token or anything. But when you get to, okay, I want to make a video, but I don't have a GPU.
There's something like TAO. TAO has a, and we're going to talk, I actually want to get your views on that in a second.
Sure.
But, they clearly have a coin, which is, useful in their universe. You do not, I think, right? So that's basically what I'm trying to figure out. Like, do you have something similar to TAO or not? It sounds like not.
Well, the paper does propose having an MOR token for rewarding compute for rewarding agents and these different things. But what I was drawing the distinction is you don't need it at the local level. You need it when you use other people's resources, right? When you talk about the network effect, like, oh, I want to build a video and that needs to run on some big GPU and I don't have a GPU. How do I pay somebody for that, right? And crypto is a really good way of doing that, is having those payment rails. So what's proposed in the paper is to implement it as a second layer on Ethereum. So use like Arbitrum or Polygon or something like that and pay, 1 cent, 2 cent per transaction. And you could do the payments for all the APIs and everything you need in order to pay for the compute. And, personally, I'm a big fan of what they're doing with Bittensor. It's a great project. There's Akash, right? There's Edge Llama has been announced. There's a new group, Ritual. I don't know if they're open source or not, but they just raised a bunch of money to do decentralized compute. So there's like half a dozen great projects emerging right now. And that's all sort of at the compute layer. But a lot of what Morpheus is trying to do is the community is rewarding people building the agents, right? Think of the agents like apps, right? They're fine-tuned to do a thing. And I want to grab an agent that, can do my accounting or can create this image or whatever, right? And people are starting to release all those specialized agents. And I want to use my smart agent to pay for that, to interact with that, to authorize that, right? And so that's kind of how you can think about it, is there's a new app store and it's in the form of agents, right? I mean, this is what got me really excited is I think AI can be the interface that gets crypto to 1 billion users, right? Mm-hmm. Because it's just so easy. You just tell it what you want to do and there's no, technical knowledge required. There's no barrier, right? It reminds me of pre-Google internet. That's crypto today, right? Yeah. And then Google showed up and there was this magic search box. You could just tell it what you wanted to do and it gave you the best of the internet. Now we're getting that with chat interfaces. And so I think that's how we get people onboarded. And then for the AI community, they didn't really care a lot about censorship resistance, or decentralization until the executive order. All of a sudden, it's really important that they be able to access compute anywhere in the world and not be censored and the rest of this stuff. So it's really cool to see the communities coming together. So Eric Voorhees hosted a party in San Francisco right after Dev Day, and we had 700 people show up, right, to effectively protest regulatory capture, because that's what this is, right? Microsoft and Google, they wrote that executive order. But Biden doesn't know what AI is. He didn't write that order, right? And so, they handed it to these guys and said, hey, we're getting all these competitors. We have to worry about safety, right? And so, that's effectively what happened, right? And so people are onto that. And, I think there's a lot of interest now in the open source and decentralization.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the difference between like what ChatGPT is and prompt-based AI and agents. So when you can, with ChatGPT or, the equivalent, you can ask it a question and it'll give you an answer, but it doesn't actually have the ability to go and do something. It's not like a robot that can go mow your lawn for you. You can't tell it to go, do tasks for you. Whereas what you've built is task-oriented. You can give it a to-do list and it'll go and actually do those things. If it has the requisite knowledge. Clearly yours has the DeFi knowledge and the crypto knowledge to do things. Other people will build other, little AI robots, task-oriented robots that can do things and have domain expertise in taxes, in, whatever. And that will be what you in the Morpheus universe, what you can go and acquire, I guess, buy in an app store. Can I buy these things? Is that how I get them, or are they just free?
I think the best analogy is Ethereum and smart contracts, right? Ethereum provided the platform where you could execute smart contracts. Morpheus provides a platform where you can execute smart agents, right? Okay. You can give them a task, you can pay them to do something, they go off and do it and return you the output, right? And so the Morpheus platform itself isn't owned by any company. It's completely open source. It's not like focused on one particular use case. It's just like, no, what do we got to build so everybody can make any smart agent they want, right? Be the platform to enable that.
And so how do I know these agents are not malicious, right? So you claim that your DeFi agent is completely on the level, but maybe the second I give you access to my wallets, you wake up one morning, you just drain everybody's wallets and you're gone, right? Like, how do I know that that's not going to happen?
Well, the Morpheus context, it's all open source. So one, people can see the code. Two, there's an incentive in the system for auditing. So it's like, I'm only going to use the agents that are audited. Like that's a very simple bar. The third thing is, there's a concept called a prompt proof.
Okay.
What intent did I express, right? What did it understand that as? What action is it proposing? And what did it do, right? That journey of like, I send Bitcoin to Bob and it said, is it this, Bob? And is this how much you want to send? And I confirm at the end of the process after it's shown me, right, in a preview, what it's going to do, right? And I'm authorizing with my key, yes, that is my intent. That's what I want to accomplish, right? And the audit is intended to match those things, right? What does it say it's going to do? What does it actually do? I want the proof of that. I want the history of that, the cryptographic proof that that's what it's executing. And then I can see it on chain, right? I said, send Bitcoin to Bob. Now I have a Bitcoin transaction. I can see it right there on the Explorer. It executed correctly. And keep in mind, this is your AI, right? You control all of the data, all the prompts. Nothing's leaving your computer until the transaction is broadcast. And this is all happening locally. There's nobody, you're not calling out to some external service. So to me, that vastly increases the safety. Right now, you're sending those prompts into a black box of ChatGPT, and they're monetizing that data. They're selling it to others, right? They're using it for training purposes. Oh, whoops, it got included in another model. Didn't mean to put your private information there, right? Right now, it's like the opposite. We're sending all of our data to Microsoft, and good luck. They're going to have fun monetizing it however they want. This is creating effectively the opposite of that.
Right. Okay. So what is, with Morpheus, what is available right now? What, can I download something? Is it working, or is this just sort of a white paper at this point?
So the white paper came out in September, and within a few months, open source developers had put together a early version that's all local. So this is live today. You can go to mor.org. Okay. Yeah, you can go to mor.org.
And by live, I can download something to my local machine?
Yeah. Okay. Go to mor.org. Right now they have installs for both Mac and Linux. Okay. Sorry, Windows people, but the builds aren't done for that yet.
Join us here in the future, Windows people.
Yeah. Like, I'm sure it'll get there, but right now there's a beta available for Mac. And when you download it, basically you're getting a local large language model. I think it defaults to Mistral or one of the other open source models. And you can talk to it and use it as an alternative for ChatGPT. And so it's on version 0.05 right now. So it's very experimental. I mean, it's really cool to play with, but it works really well. And you're going to get pretty good text results, right? I'd love to see a multimodal model next that can also generate images. And I know people are experimenting with those right now. It doesn't have the wallet connection yet, but it looks like the developers are pretty close to releasing those integrations, because you want the user to be able to connect any wallet they want, or use any coin they want, or connect any agent they want, right? Again,
what wallets will it connect to? Is it? I assume MetaMask is the most obvious one.
I think that's a good starting point. Well, Shapeshift is cool because that has recently added Bitcoin via the integration with MetaMask and their snaps. You can now send native Bitcoin in MetaMask since September, which is really cool. Yeah, that's a great unlock. That's 100 million people use MetaMask. Now there's a wallet you can send native Bitcoin through their integration. Yeah, I was really excited to see that at the Permissionless conference. So that's live. So I think that would be one of the great things to
can I transmute Bitcoin into Ethereum? Via that what's under? How is it doing it
with no bridge, with no wrappers, with no bridges, native to native, because Shapeshift is integrated Thorchain in the back end.
That's what I was wondering.
And the Thorchain guys they have a native Bitcoin node, they have a native Ethereum node, and so
there's not very many people that have that running. And I'm like, Thorchain is like one of like a handful that can do that.
And that's why I think they've really taken off recently, right? I saw they surpassed Uniswap in volume. Like as far as, if you're dexing, like Thorchain's, I think the first that can go between all the different major chains.
Wow. Yeah, I know. There's some other efforts underway, like Layer 0, I believe, was one. So it's not. So basically, for those who don't know this part of it, so in the olden days of the last few years, when you bridged an asset from the Ethereum blockchain to Polygon, largely what was happening was you were locking it in a smart contract, the asset on Ethereum, and it would just stay parked there, and then it would mint a new asset that represents this asset on the Polygon chain, and then you could have like synthetic Ethereum over on Polygon or whatever, and then you do whatever on that side, and at some point you'd come back and unlock your original token on the original chain, and what happened was these things just got hacked like crazy. So a lot of the big hacks that you heard about were effectively some version of somebody taking control of the original assets, and then the assets that were bridged over to the other chain were suddenly unbacked by assets over here, right? So, so this idea arose that that's a very bad way to bridge things. You actually want to bridge the actual assets. You don't want to have representational assets on the target chain. You want to have the actual assets move from one chain to another, and sometimes you can't do it, but you want to get as close to that as possible. Thorchain solves for that by making it, by basically doing that. And Layer 0 is another sort of bridge thing that tries to do that as well. And so, I think is Shapeshift. So Shapeshift integrated is now using Thorchain under the hood, and that's how they're doing it. Got it.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly.
With you.
And then they did the integration with MetaMask, which extended sort of those capabilities to the 100 million people that have a MetaMask account. Just install the Shapeshift snap, and you should be able to have those capabilities. So, but to go back to your question, I like this approach, and it reminds me of the early days of Ethereum, where it's not just rewarding miners, right? I mean, when I was talking with Vitalik early on, that was his initial concept, was I'll just, have miners. But I said, look, we have to reward coders. We have to reward, people building the software, have to reward, not everybody's got a mining machine. We should let people, put capital in, right? And back in 2013, 2014, that was Bitcoin. Right, was effectively the only option. And so I see so many sort of similar concepts in the Morpheus paper. It's like, yes, we should reward coders, we should reward compute, we should reward people providing capital. And they've come up with this concept where you use staked ETH, right? So it's sitting on Lido, it's staked ETH, it's generating yield, right? You lock that up and it only contributes the yield. So you can pull your principal out whenever you want. And if you want to compete with others to contribute that yield to the liquidity of the More token, to demand for the More token, to bootstrap the network, basically, that's, I think, a really brilliant approach, right? Because it protects people in a lot of ways where they're not sending it off to some team and the team promises they're going to produce something later. One, the network's already up and running. And two, okay, I can take out my principal ETH whenever I want, right, and go do something else with it. And so if I'm already holding ETH and I've got a 3 to 5 year, bull market position on it, why not stake it here, right, and contribute the yield and support this project I'm really excited about that's doing open source AI. So I like that whole approach. One, fair launch, right? There's no team, there's no pre-mine, there's no token sale.
Can I just stop you for a second? I just want to make sure I understand what you've already said. So the Morpheus network or platform needs resources. It needs money to keep running, right? So you ask people to stake their staked ETH or stake their ETH with you and contribute the yield to you instead of taking it themselves, right? That's basically what you're saying. And now, why would I do that other than I like you? Is there a reason?
Earning the More tokens, right? So everybody paying for that compute in case they don't have enough resources locally and they need to pay for more compute from somebody else. How do you handle that? You pay in the More token, right?
How do I sort of like Render where I'm paying for GPU? Yeah, okay.
Sure, exactly. And how do I know that this is a good actor? I want them staking more, right? That's a common solution. You look at how Filecoin works. people put Filecoin up to prove that they're going to keep the data online, right?
Yeah.
If you have an economic interest, all of a sudden you've aligned the economic interests of the participants. So if you look at the paper, there's all these places where it uses the token. And yes, on the capital side, okay, you want the protocol buying the more, adding liquidity to the pool, making it easy for people to make these payments. But instead of putting in the capital directly, it uses this staked ETH mechanism to contribute that yield. And again, there's no token sale, there's no pre-sale, there's no team, there's no pre-mine. These are all like mining algorithms, right? Everybody's competing to provide capital every day, right? Competing to provide compute every day. People are writing new code and new agents and releasing them, and they're competing for these different rewards in the network.
David, you froze again. Can you see me,
Mark?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, you're back. You're back. Yeah. Sorry, you froze for a little bit, but
Sure.
it's probably. I'll just have to do that again. So, okay. So let's talk a little bit now about the competitors, because I want to sort of get your neck deep in this world, and you know what everybody else is doing. Also, I would imagine. So let's start with TAO, the coin TAO, and the company and protocol Bittensor. What are they up to, and how does it differ from what you're doing?
So, Bittensor is great. It provides decentralized compute, right? And the compute is, people running, large language models and responding to requests, or the compute is training large language models, right? How do we become not dependent on Meta to release the next open source model? Well, we need compute resources, right? Akash is doing something very similar. They have announced, a huge number of GPUs for training open source large language models. So, right, they're in this game, right?
Okay,
I mentioned Edge Llama. So, yeah.
Yeah. So if I understand you correctly, so people like all these companies, Bittensor, et cetera, they actually are creating what I was describing earlier, sort of the it's not independent. So it's not like Neuromancer where it can do stuff by itself, but it is a LLM training farm. And so it's continually creating new models, which then can be condensed and downloaded onto local small machines. But you need a massive amount of compute in order to train those models to begin with. And it would be preferable if those were open source things that were sort of owned by a community rather than dictated to us with all kinds of, propaganda baked into it from XYZ company named Microsoft or Google or whatever. And so, all right, so we like that a little bit better because it's a more truthful AI. So you guys would actually potentially be really good partners, right? Because you need those continuously updated general models to make your agents. You handle the agent part of it, so yeah. So you're not really competitors. You are in fact very synergistic. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why a few weeks ago when I spoke at the Blockchain Summit in Fort Worth, I called for let's have a decentralized AI summit. And guess who's coming? It's Bittensor and Akash and all the major players doing the compute and doing the fine tuning and doing the models. We're good friends with the guys at Noose Research, and they're releasing some of the best models. So yeah, it's really cool to see sort of this community forming. And it's like, how do we get those people, rewards? How do we monetize their agents? How do we audit the agents so we prove that they're doing what they're saying they're doing? How do we connect them into wallets? How do we, and so you can think of Morpheus as really just providing the tools to integrate all these different projects together, right? And hand a GUI, hand a user interface to the end user, right? Here's your personal AI. It's connected to all this great stuff in the back end. How do we bring that community together? So in Austin on December 9th, we've effectively got the top 150 people in the space coming together to do exactly that. Map out, what are the standards we need? What's the language we need to describe this? How do we, connect all these different pieces together for this decentralized AI tech stack?
So your system or your white paper describes using Filecoin for storage. And I think there's a couple different pieces of it where it's where possible using decentralized blockchain, paid for, things in order to make the Morpheus network itself run. So as utilities for Morpheus. So, in Filecoin, it's decentralized storage. You pay for that in File, which is the Filecoin native coin. And so how are you using, I guess, what are you storing in Filecoin if everything's local?
So, you can have the local version of Morpheus, but the data only lives on your computer. So the obvious question is, how do I move it to my phone? How do I move it to my other computer? If the computer dies, do I lose all my information? Right? So it's helpful to have a persistent cloud copy of what I'm doing, right? And Filecoin is fully encrypted. It's controlled by the user, right? It's this decentralized network. So I can, use my smart agent and say, put a copy of this, keep a copy of this whole history on Filecoin, and I'm willing to pay the, $1 or whatever. I mean, right now it's almost free to put things on Filecoin. And I want to keep a copy there so I can use it across all my devices, right? So that's sort of almost all smart contracts at this point use IPFS and Filecoin for their data. I think that's the logical choice here. I've had a lot of experience with Filecoin and other decentralized clouds, and I think that's a good standard to build on for the individual user, again, to control their data, control their AI. I want to be able to persistently take that wherever I go, right? And not
it's like my Apple Cloud backup. It's the same thing. It's just sort of, got it. Okay. So It's just a decentralized version of Apple Cloud backup for my AI stuff and my crypto, my crypto stuff. So super cool.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. And just to clarify again, the cool thing is it's a community project. I've put a lot of time into, donating my contributions to the GitHub repository and, working on that, and other people are working on the smart contracts and other people are working on the wallet integrations and other people are preparing computers that'll be able to run the different protocols. It's sort of, we are all Morpheus, right? There's no founder. Nobody even knows who invented it. The Anons kind of disappeared after they dropped the paper. And so, they did their part and I thank them for it. But, it's nice to have something sort of owned by the whole community, and not have, any one company sort of steering it, but trying to build standards instead. And, as I think about that process, what worked really well with Ethereum was the whole Ethereum request for comments. Right. If ERC20, right. ERC 721, like those numbers became code for fungible token, non-fungible token, right. Those standards sort of emerged through a process where anybody could make a proposal. And, if it was good enough, it got codified, but you could still pick any one you wanted. Right. And so that marketplace, it feels like there's a need for that too. And so one of the things that we're going to cover at the AI Summit is going to be this idea of a Morpheus request for proposal, right? What are Morpheus requests for comments, like a MRC? Like, how do we define each of these new things now that we need an AI to work with a smart contract or an AI to integrate with a wallet? How do we define that language? And so, I have a lot of faith that the market will find cool solutions. You just have to create the space for that and give people a way to find all those resources.
Okay. Very cool. Very cool. So, let me ask you about yourself. So who are you? Where did you come from? What have you been doing before this project?
So, been in crypto since 2012. I guess most people know me for writing the paper on decentralized applications. So if you know dApps, I'm the dApps guy. That was October of 13. I put out, hey guys, let's take those great things about Bitcoin and use them for other projects, right? So I defined it as it needed to be open source. It had to be peer-to-peer. It had to have a blockchain backend. It had to have a token, right, in order to be decentralized, right? Because that, I think, was the brilliance of Satoshi, was he realized that the software had to be able to pay for its own hardware, right? Absence a token, the software doesn't have any way to pay for its own persistence, right? It ends up getting captured by some centralized company eventually, right?
Yes.
And so I said, okay, that's a really brilliant model. I codified that into the paper, had a bunch of cool co-authors that built that with me, and then Ethereum ended up using that language of decentralized applications, right? And they were going to be a platform for smart contracts and dApps. And so it's been cool because that put me in a position where a lot of people have wanted me to help with their different protocols over the years. And so I was involved in the early days of, Filecoin, and the early days of Ethereum, early days of a lot of protocols. And so it's been a very rewarding sort of last 10 years. And I've spent time on the engineering side, some time on the capital side, but honestly, my passion is for the permissionless and decentralized stuff. And so I think going forward, I'm probably just going to focus fully on the open source stack, because I've sort of become a little jaded that, the centralized stuff always ends up still getting crushed by the state, right? Ask my friends who have been waiting 10 years for an ETF approval, right?
Yes.
It's like, if we just educate the regulators a little more and, they're good guys and eventually they'll come around. It's like, it's like, another month and
the hard way.
Yeah, exactly. And I've played that martyr enough. So, that's a quick description. Is I like building protocols. I write papers. I really like building communities of open source people to kind of create infrastructure. But that's often been.
Who were you before crypto? Who were you before 2012? Were you an engineer? Did you go to school for this or self-train? Like, what is your background other than?
I didn't go to school for anything. I dropped out of college to build tech companies when I was a kid. I'd cut a deal with my parents that if I built a multi-million-dollar company, I could drop out of college. But it took me a semester, so I had to wait till I was one semester in to drop out. But I got into the early days of the web back when like online publishing was cutting edge.
Oh,
just just to date myself a little bit, right? It's funny. The last project I worked on before crypto was an AI project. Back when we called it natural language processing in 2011, 2012. And so I effectively realized I was a little too early on that particular trend, and the technology just wasn't there in 2012. And so I had been getting into Bitcoin and decided I was going to put all of my time and effort into Bitcoin. So I ended up speaking at the first Bitcoin conference in San Jose in May of 2013 that the foundation put on, and then ended up, I guess I've spoken at like 90 blockchain conferences since then, and sort of just been pushing this idea of progressive decentralization, like that we're going to go further and further up the tech stack, right? If you've heard everything that can be decentralized will be decentralized, that was sort of a Johnston's law I put out there in 2014.
That was like, you. Okay.
Yeah. And so I was like, guys, this is inevitable, right? Now we've got decentralized money. We can build decentralized smart contracts. Then we'll have decentralized clouds. And now we're finally getting to that point where we've got decentralized applications, which is what I'm excited about, because that we're getting towards the top of the tech stack. And there are effectively less and less reasons where somebody says, oh, but I need a company for insert XYZ, right? I want there eventually to be no point at which says, oh, I need a company for. I just want you to be able to do everything in an open source permissionless way.
Yeah. Now it makes a lot of sense. So what out there right now intrigues you other than, I guess in the crypto world, what do you, other than AI stuff, is there anything, are you excited still about DeFi, or do you think it's been discredited? Like where's your head at on the rest of the space?
Well, the funny thing is, to me, last cycle, there's a lot of DeFi in name only. People that were using the term that had nothing to do with decentralized finance, right?
Well, we all agree
the Celsiuses and everybody else, right? So, what's encouraging is that Aave is doing just great. Compound's doing just fine. Uniswap and ThorChain, if you look at their numbers, it's all up and to the right, like the number of users, the amount of volume, and the usage is really taking off. And so my hope is that in this cycle, in 24, 25, we have the infrastructure now. It's truly decentralized. You've removed all the custodians. What you've discredited were the banks that were LARPing as if they were DeFi, right? And those guys are all gone, right? And so if we can focus all of our efforts on truly decentralized stuff where there is no custodian, It's hard to get rugged when there's no custodian. When
Right.
you are directly interacting with the protocol, there's always still technical risk. There's always still bugs, but people are getting better about building decentralized insurance for that, having, bug bounties, really sort of making these protocols battle hardened over time, just like Bitcoin became. I mean, people forget about the accidental fork in, 2010 and 2013. Like, it required some fixing. Like, it wasn't easy in the beginning, but over time, right, it became stronger and stronger as more people worked on it, right?
Yeah, 2013 was when I got into it, so that was sort of when I caught the Bitcoin bug, and then I actually interviewed Vitalik a couple of weeks before the Ethereum ICO. So
nice.
I got pointed in his direction. There was another ghost of Christmas Future that pointed me at Thing in person, and I wasn't really sure who I was talking to or why, but I was like, I'm just going to follow because the smart person told me to go over here. I'm just going to go and see what's there. So this feels like it could be that again. So so hopefully it is. That would be. I think it'd be fantastic. I love what you're building. I think it's pretty fascinating, and I do agree with you that I think that strong AI, like strong encryption, should be a citizen right. And I think actually things become very dangerous if it's if it's controlled by the top and AI is just used as a way to sort of monitor and control everyone. It should be the other way around. AI should be used to monitor and control the government by the citizenry. It should be the telescope should be the other way around. We should be watching everything they're doing and know a lot more about what they're doing, which I kind of think is part of the fear on their side. Is they saw social media start to expose a lot of things that weren't commonly known about what they were up to, right? Back when they just controlled 3 channels, ABC, NBC, and CBS, and that was it. Those are the only mass broadcast sources of information. They could control that pretty easily, and then now X and Twitter especially is completely out of their control, right? So they're like, well, AI would be that times a million, right? We don't want that. So right. I think that in my guess is that's part of it.
Well, so, and if you were actually concerned about AI risk, right, which is what they're saying, right, that's what they're putting out there. We know it's regulatory capture, but even if you took it at face value, even if you said it's good faith, if you were concerned about AI risk, you should want the individual holding a private key to ultimately be controlling the AI, because the only thing the AI won't never be able to generate is a private key. Right? The laws of thermodynamics are on our side, right? The laws of physics say it's impossible to brute force a private key, certainly in quantum resistant cryptography. And so we have this magic tool where you can prove with math, this is what the individual wanted to accomplish, right? And like you're saying, the real risk is you've got 1 or 2 big parties, right, that aren't well aligned with other people, and they're off doing their own thing for their own purposes, right? That's not what we want. Yeah. We want an open market for this information. It's like the creation of the printing press, right? Some jurisdictions tried to ban the printing press. It didn't go well for them the next few centuries. The places that embraced it, they did pretty well, right? And so you really want to be in the place, if that's the UK, if it ends up being, wherever in the world I have to move, I'm not going to miss out on the most disruptive technology in human history because of my zip code. I can assure you of that.
Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Well, this has been a completely fascinating hour, David. So thank you so much for taking a little bit of time to join us. Give us your plugs. Where can we find you? What are your websites and Twitter handles?
I am D Johnston, E as in Echo, C as in Charlie, D Johnston EC on X. That's pretty much where I post everything. I've got a Medium as well. People can find David A. Johnston on Medium. I've published about 100 articles over the years about crypto and related subjects. But yeah, you can find me on GitHub. There's Morpheus AI's GitHub, so check that out. All of the code, it's all been built in public since day one, so check it out. It's all on there. And there's a Morpheus Discord, but I would probably start at mor.org. That's one of the community websites. It's not run by me, but one of the community built this beautiful website for the Morpheus community. It's got the downloads. It talks about it. It has a copy of the white paper, all that kind of stuff. I would just start there. If you want to test it out, download Morpheus on your computer. It's free.
Very good. All right. Thank you very much. This has been Hash Rate. My name is Mark Jeffrey. We'll see you all next time. The Name and the Shadow, the new sci-fi thriller from best-selling author Mark Jeffrey. Action-adventure meets AI, shadow governments, blockchain, and ancient civilization. If you enjoy science fiction, philosophy, action, duels, futurist technologies, romance, unexpected twists and turns, and a good old-fashioned killer ride, you'll find plenty to love. A tour de force of the imagination. The Name and the Shadow. Available now on Amazon.